Welcome back. Glad to have you here on the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast. We are going to dive into a great topic where we're continuing on from our discussion the last few podcasts about balancing short term tasks, deliverables with these long term goals. In the last episode, we talked about the core and the code. So if you missed that episode, I encourage you to go back to that. I realize that there's so much that I like to pack into these podcasts. I want to break them down for you a bit more. And today I want to focus in on the challenge of how do we shift our energy when we're trying to balance all these things? How do we tackle these short term and long term tasks, these goals? And how do we maintain the productivity, particularly for those of you that are in the AEC industry? You're an environmental consultant, you're going in the field, maybe you're coming out of the field, you've got a report deliverable, you've got some longer term objectives, right? You got performance reviews you might need to get done. These are all different things we're going to be having to shift between. And so, building on our last couple of episodes, we get this a sense of our energy and how do we manage that effectively to address all these tasks. It's not just about time management, certainly that plays into it, but it's a knowing how to focus and shift your energy. And we've talked a little bit about this, not super in depth with the five voices, but you intuitively know tasks that are going to take a lot of energy and those which are not is energy draining. In fact, it might be giving you energy, giving you life. And so we're going to just dive in here and go into the importance of energy management. It's kind of funny, you hear about energy management. We're in the heat of summer right now. How do we manage our energy, right? Literally, we might have blackouts. We've got, energy that we've got to look at because there's such a drain on the system when everything is so hot, for example. Everybody's turning on their air conditioning units. They're trying to get the fans going. And so there's a drain on the system all at once. And what happens is, worst case scenario, you can have a blackout or a brownout where you temporarily lose power. And so everything comes to a halt. Sometimes it's just a short one, but it can be longer. So how do we do that? How do we avoid getting to the burnout? Right. And so I want to walk you through some key ideas here in this podcast. And again, we're all about helping you be the most intelligent human leader. If you know this about yourself, you're going to be better able to lead your team. You're going to be better able to understand where they're at and maybe see the warning signs of where their energy levels might be dipping and their productivity not being as impactful. So, understand your personal energy peaks. When are you most alert and productive? Uh, you may have heard of this phrase chronotype or um, where you might be more energetic at certain points of the day. Some people, it's not always in the morning for some people. Some people actually do their best work at night or in the evenings, kind of off the normal work schedule, if you will, the 9 to 5. And so recognize when you're most alert and when you feel like you can tackle the harder, more challenging problems, and when you're really lacking that emotional, mental space that requires the energy to focus on these longer term things. And so sometimes it's, we're going to talk about how you can shift and focus on getting those shorter term tasks done. Look at when you're batching your tasks together and find out where we can put those together for high energy tasks and where those other slower periods may occur. I was talking, for example, to a client just today, and he was talking about how he does social media posts and get them all done. And he's like, if I spend that time and I just batch them for the whole month or get a lot of them all together, because it's not that they're hard, but you add all these together, it's just focus, lining them all up, making sure everything is dialed in, right? And then you get that and you spend that time of, let's just say, 4 hours a month, rather than waiting and kind of doing them one off, or it takes longer over time. So it's just learning how can we batch and group these tasks that we need to do. And sometimes these are a bunch of short tasks that we can group together and that culminate in a larger one. And so understanding how this shows up for you. Now, one of these things I learned early on was the bane or the the email or these things that don't take a lot of our brain power. But what happens is a lot of people open up the simple things first when actually they have the most energy, they have the most focus, and they kind of let that wash away, if you will, instead of flipping it on their head and saying, you know what, I've got to, for example, I've got to write a report or I've got to get a section of a document done. It's going to require a lot of focus and effort. And it's better to take it on when you have all that energy and kind of drive, use that. And when you're kind of your tank is low and when you've kind of focused on that big task that maybe deliverable or moving that milestone, right? Then it's a good time to take the on these smaller little tasks. And so we're going to get a little bit more about strategy here in the podcast. But the thing is, if you're not understanding your energy levels and who you are and how you show up and where you're at, if you're, for example, more future oriented in your voice in the way that you see the bigger picture and you're focusing on these things naturally, we want to get you in that place of naturally being there in your what I call preferred way of being. However, if you're a person that is let's just say more nurturing oriented, they're looking at the emotional connection, the relationships, how's everybody doing? Commonly this is what I see in maybe HR or some kind of medical field. I talked with a physical therapist today, and they're looking at the people's emotional needs, or looking at harmony, and that's something that really energizes them, puts them in a good place. If you're asking them to do something very strategic, very object oriented, it's not that they can't do it, but recognize that when your energy has to go that way, you're going to have to be prepared. And if you're not prepared for that, what's going to happen is you're going to undermine yourself because you're probably going to delay on getting those things done. You just don't have the energy, you just don't have the focus, you don't have the desire because it's not your natural way of being. But if you understand this about yourself and your team, you can start to look for others or at least explain to others if they're asking you to do these things, the reality of actually having it come together. Um, for example, I've been asked to do QA/QC reports. It takes a lot of detail, takes a lot of focus. It's something I can do. I've done tons of biological reports, environmental impact studies, or environmental impact reports. I've done them. The reality is, though, it takes me quite a bit of focus and energy. And so when I do that, I can't be responsive to a lot of people and other demands, which I normally am actually pretty good at and balancing all this information. So people, I just have to recognize that. Number one, I recognize it myself. Number two, then I communicate it to my team so that they're not unaware of, hey, these are the challenges and the focus that David needs to have to be able to be successful here. So don't assume everybody's going to process it and have the energy the same way you do, and communicate that. Be clear on how and what your strategies are to getting work done. So some ways we can look at this. I'm actually going to share ways of strategies for shifting energy here in this podcast. For those of you that know, if you've never listened before, I am certified with Giant Worldwide. They're an amazing organization. I include many of their tools in the coaching program. And one of the tools that we have in there is this tool called the 5 gears. And for those of you watching me on YouTube, you can see the book here. You can actually look how to be productive when there's never enough time. Yeah, this is a great framework to understand our energy level. And again, there's a whole book on this. I walk people through in a greater detail, but I'm going to give you an overview here of how you can look at your energy, how you can shift it to be able to address these ongoing short-term challenges that are faced, and then making sure you're hitting those longer-term milestone tasks, those goals that you're shooting for. How many of you have had those long-term goals? You had a review, let's just say a performance review, and a year later you're like, man, I didn't really make progress on those. We don't want that to be. You want you to be that intelligent human leader where you've made progress, you've moved toward those goals, you've essentially collapsed time in the way you organize yourself and organize your energy, strategizing, if you will, how to use and be the best steward of your resources that you have and knowing yourself well. So I'm gonna give you this. If for those of you, you may be old enough to think about shifting a car, and nowadays it's all changed a little bit, but there's ways where we shift. So if even in today's modern cars, uh, I drive a Subaru, and you can actually toggle the little pedal, the panel, paddles, I guess is what I want to say, where it will shift the car down and up. I live up in the mountains here in Southern California, Running Springs, and so there's a constant downshifting when I'm driving down the mountains. I don't have to keep braking so much, taking more energy to slow my car down. And same thing, I can actually upshift as well. So there's this going back and forth with the energy. And so when we look at the 5 gears framework, there's ways we can move that energy. So the first gear is simply just recharging. It's just making sure that you're getting regular breaks, you recharge yourself for whatever that is for you. It's different for different people. For me, I actually get recharged by being around people, being in conversation. I get energized by that. But others need time alone. They need to be more inwardly thoughtful, and just and there's nothing wrong with that. I recognized that early on in my marriage. I read a great book called Introverts and Extroverts in Love with my wife, and we realized how different we were in this space and how she recharges by being alone, by just spending some time by herself, processing things. And then she's great. She wants to come back and see people. It's not like she doesn't want to see anybody, but there's a place for that. While I actually get kind of decharge, I lose that energy if I'm not around a lot of people. So it's related. So you think about how do you recharge with each person? Everyone's a little different. And then there are a gear of social activities. So this is a way of being. So just think about how we're shifting between our energy. So if you have to go to social mode, we're moving from gear one up to gear two, social mode, which is that social activities is building relationships. We all have that. Again, from somebody like me, I like that gear. It's something I'm normally in. And I would say even in some regards, you know, gear one and two, I can easily go between those. Some people, it's not as easy. Some people, the social mode is challenging, but they can turn it on. I've seen introverts, I've seen very inwardly thoughtful people have amazing energy. They're great speakers. They can turn it on, but they also need to be able to turn it off as well. Um, so gear three is focusing on routine tasks that require less mental energy. So this is just kind of like checking my email, getting my timesheet done. These are you know replying to an email, perhaps some basic stuff that we just have to get done. It's just these tasks. They're routine. They're nothing extraordinary. Stuff that we're familiar with. Maybe somebody's asking you for a quick quote on a proposal. They want to pick your brain on getting feedback on an employee's performance review. These are not difficult tasks. These are things you do over the course of each day, week, month. They're common. They're regular. Now, these are also things, generally speaking, you can do on your own, in my experience. You can just get done, process, and move on. Gear four, so we're going from gear one to recharge, gear two to social, gear three to task, and gear four to collaborate. Work with others on collaborative projects. So this is where we can't be alone. We have to be working with others intently. And so we're in this energy space where I've got to be working with other people. It's being in a meeting. I've got to get them something. They're going to give me feedback on that. And it's very, again, collaborative in nature. And finally, the fifth gear is that deep work. It's where you have to really focus, take on critical tasks, and oftentimes, some people again are very good at these. And so the question I would ask you is, as we talk about recharge mode, social mode, task mode, collaborative mode, and then kind of this focused deep work mode, where do you find yourself more typically? Because what I will say is none of them are bad or good. They're just different ways of being. And some people can do amazing work in gear five, but that means they have to really downshift to gear one recharge so that they can actually do that focused work. Some people love to do the social work. They're in that gear most of the time. I did a lot of business development, did a lot of mentoring. I was working with people, building relationships. I like to be in gear two. Gear three, I'm not so big a fan of these routine tasks that require less mental energy, but I know they need to get done. Collaborative mode, I do like to do collaborative mode because it's similar in that it's interacting with people. So we will gravitate to certain modes, if you will, based on our energy and based on our what I've talked about in the past, your voice order, or your preferred way of being. So when we are aware of where do we shift our energy? It's going to help us be more productive in the tasks that we're doing. Is the short-term task I'm doing, is that something routine, basic all the time? Yeah, most of them are probably are, but there are some short-term tasks or goals that we might need to do just to move things on to a larger goal. And so recognizing this and how you naturally show up is so important with your energy. um, there's different ways we can shift energy too. One of them I've used also is the Pomodoro technique. So it's a way of doing that focused mode work. And if you haven't looked at that up, check it out. It's generally like a 25-minute segment of work, and then you take a 5-minute break. That 5 minutes is your recharge. You've shifted the gears. You've gone from the focus mode very intently, and you've downshifted to recharge. It could be a task mode too. It could just be a series of tasks you've got to get done in that time frame of that 25 minutes. But the idea is that you're intentionally focusing your energy and you're putting yourself in a specific gear to get that done. If again, I love the analogy of driving because this really works for me in that if you're going, for example, up a mountain too, you can also downshift if you need more power. So it's understanding, where do I need more power? How do I get there? And if you can't reach that power and you know you need to go there, there's some things you have to do. There's some things you have to shift. So what are some, for example, if you need that additional power, how would you energize yourself? From physical exercise possibly to being mindfulness and meditation. Nutrition is huge here. These are all different podcast episodes in and of themselves. But what I like, the thing here I want to hit home is on this podcast is, if you're aware of these things both externally to yourself and internally, you're going to be much better at showing up, being that intelligent leader, helping to guide other people because you know yourself well and you know your limits, you know your strengths, and you know how to get into power and clarity and move forward. Like we talked about in our last episode about living a life of truth and living a life of values, and you're in alignment with those things. So, as we dive in here a little bit further, I just want to give you a little bit more as we talk about balancing these short term and long term goals. The idea is, and I mentioned this earlier, is that we use our high energy focus, our time for that where we have the high energy. Like I said, gear five in the book here is that focus time. Use the energy there. Um, Or if there's things that are truly like urgent emergency that require, they're not going to last a long time, but they do require a lot of presence because there's some nuances there, and emergencies are a big deal. Or if you know that, hey, a deliverables needs to go out on, it's Monday and it needs to go out on Friday by 5 p.m. and you're like, yeah, I need to make sure I block off enough time to get those things done. Be prepared and give yourself the energy to do that. So, don't be unwise saying, "Well, let me go out the night before and I'm gonna, stay out talking with my friends all night and whatever." And you wake up and you're tired in the morning, you're not having the energy, and so at the end of the day, you're dragging, and you knew it was coming at the end of the day. So be proactive. Look at that. This is really important too when you're traveling. I found it as well to be careful about your energy levels and plan the tasks and things that are coming and be realistic about what you actually can accomplish and do. I have a tendency to overestimate that in myself. So for those of you that may be similar in a connector voice, be careful about overestimating what you can actually accomplish and the energy you're actually going to have to get that work done. Again, for the long-term planning, make sure you actually pick dedicated times, focus time. One thing I've noticed, I use Microsoft a lot, and it gives you a focus time on your calendar. If you turn it on, a little toggle, it literally actually picks times on your calendar to block out an hour, 2 hours, maybe, um, to where you can focus on these long-term projects. Again, looking at that when you're in a high energy state. So if you know you're going to be eating lunch and you're going to be, kind of losing energy, don't put your focus time at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, where you know that your energy level is dipping. Maybe it's you know 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock when you have more energy, or it could be 7 o'clock at night. If you're a later person, you're like, I want to eat, I want to get through some different things, and I'm at a place where I can really focus. Just look at that and realize it's different for different people. Delegation is also huge. I think that's hard for some people. knowing again who you are and how you can manage your energy of like, how do I delegate routine tasks? It's one of the things I work with clients on, and we actually go through this whole process of identifying your workload. How long does it take? What's the frequency? Um, and essentially the energy, if you will, that's needed to get those done. And are there other people that are better suited to help you get that done? Don't just think because it's on your plate and just because it's in front of you means that you have to do it all. I made that mistake early on in my career where I had this huge project. I felt like I had to do everything in it, and it was quite a bit of a learning experience of understanding management and how do I manage all this information and actually put it and delegate it. The most successful project managers I've seen know how to delegate well, and they can share that, give people guidance on what it looks like, how long it will take. They're very specific, and they help their team members be successful by knowing how to delegate effectively. So something to think about there. Um, we have all these different challenges of how to balance these short-term and long-term goals. So I'll give you some practical tips as we kind of wrap up the podcast here today. Again, I want to deal with a lot more in here, but if you're mindful about your energy, where is it high energy? When is it low energy? Look at your calendar and look at your ideal week. Kind of plan some things here out. Where is your routines? And so I've talked about the core four in the last episode, and I've talked about it in previous episodes. The core four for me is a foundational tool that I use in my Warrior app that I guide people to in looking at different areas in their life: body, being, balance, business. And so if you develop good, healthy routines and habits that serve you, obviously your morning routine is a huge one. Whenever you get up, whatever that is for you, uh, look at the first, hour, 2 hours of your day, and what are you spending time on? Are you spending your time on when you've got good high energy, scrolling on your phone? Are you just watching the TV maybe? Or are you being more judicious with your time? Are you looking and being more conscientious of how you're using the resources you have? We have time as our most valuable asset. And so look about what that routine is like. And again, reach out to me. I do free discovery calls. I would love to talk with you more and see if there's a good way that I can help you and the resources I've had and the ones that I use to be successful with myself and clients. But then look at your breaks. Look where there's times where you can recharge the day. If that's going out and walking around the office, it's stretching your legs, it's maybe going to the gym, maybe it's reading a book. It's being strategic in the way that you're recharging. It's you're being very intentional saying, "Hey, I'm going to do this. I want to learn something new," or "I want to have a conversation with somebody. I'm going to call my mom, or I'm going to call a friend at this time." Be intentional with the way you're recharging yourself. And then similarly to a morning work routine or waking up and looking at that, also look at your end of the day one. And I'm actually trained with the Full Focus Planner. It's another great tool I have over here that helps me look at these tools of I should say, it's a tool that helps me look at my daily habit routines and what am I doing and how much time does it take and what I might want to rearrange. And so, as we look at this from our daily routines, from the morning to the evening, I'd say ideal week, looking ahead of the critical tasks you have and the energy, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast about maybe you have a deliverable or a key meeting with a client you need to be looking at. And then seek feedback, adjust, listen to others. How are you showing up with others? I talked about that in the previous podcast as well about getting different feedback from different voices. Now, people are going to be have different energy levels for different things. And so as you know your team, and one of the things I really love with the five voices, I go through and can actually go through, assess your team and show you the voice order of each of your team members, including yourself, see where they line up. And that'll help you understand their energy and where their focus is. Are they more present oriented? Are they more future oriented? How are they showing up and what empowers them? What gets them motivated? Because if you understand that, you're going to be able to set them for success, inevitably that's going to serve you better because you're going to be showing them as a leader and creating more productivity, more engagement with your team because they're living in a life that they like. They live a life where they're energetic and doing the things that they love most. I know I've covered so much here in this podcast in just a short period of time. And so I welcome your guys' feedback here. But the bottom line is, I want you to be intelligent in how you manage your energy. I want you to be intentional, not accidental in how you're showing up for yourself and for the others that you lead. So that when you're having these competing demands for these short-term goals, these longer-term missions, if you will, that you can use things like the five gears. You can use that framework. You can use some of these tools, and this is what I curate for you as part of Steward Your Business, the Steward Yourself program. So if this is something that resonates with you, let's reach out. Let's have a conversation. But nonetheless, please leave your comments, leave your feedback. I love to hear from you about what resonated, what really uh, you got value out of. And if you truly got value out of that, I would appreciate hearing from you and a review, whether you send it to me personally, leave a 5-star review, leave a comment, promote it, share that. Let's get the word out so we can help others be intelligent human leaders, right? When we all rise together, we'll benefit ourselves, our organizations, our community. And so that's what we're looking for, is to strive to be the healthiest person, supporting one another, serving one another out of love, out of abundance, out of care, and not in a place of deficit where your energy is at the bottom and you're like, man, I just don't know if I could do this another day. I'm here to lead you to victory. We do not want you stuck. We want to get you unstuck and in a place where you're feeling successful and that you're achieving the goals you desire and having the life that you've truly dreamed that you really wanted to be. So don't get stuck if you're feeling, like, man, David, I'm just getting hit over wave. Let's talk, let's work together. You have an advocate with me here, David Carr, with Steward Your Business. And I will continue to bring these ideas and topics to help you be that intelligent human leader. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time on our podcast, have an amazing day, week. Watch your energy and show up in power and clarity and win the day. All right, guys. Thanks so much for listening. Take care. Have a great night.